Hello, everybody. I am the Last Pretender, and this is, of course, the first of what will hopefully be several videos getting into the sort of nitty-gritty mechanics of Dominions and generally understanding how things work. At times, Dominions can be a fairly complex game, but also a very opaque game. It can be difficult to really understand how all of the little how things are decided, how things are done, how important various elements are within the game. And for that reason, I'm going to be going into the sort of nitty-gritty details for two reasons. One is so that you guys can have a better understanding of exactly how things work. And two, so that I can kind of teach myself in making these videos how various things work in Dominions. So we're going to be going over a lot of things that are very basic, but to have a more thorough understanding of how they function is going to give you a better chance of figuring out what the right decision is at any point in time. And for that reason, today we are going to be digging into something that is fundamental to Dominions, but it's not necessarily the number one thing that you need to worry about, but it's something that of which permeates throughout all of Dominions, and that a better understanding of it can help you eventually. Also because whenever I'm going to be doing my other videos, I'm probably going to be referencing this a whole bunch. So, yeah, it's good that we get this out of the way now. And the thing we're going to be talking about is the Dominions random number. Now, in this case, this particular item and almost all the items that of which I'm going to be covering in this series are covered in the tome that is the Dominions 5 manual. Yes, this game has a manual that you kind of need to look at regularly to really understand what's going on, but hopefully I'm going to make that less painful of a process so that way, after watching these videos, you'll better know how everything works and you'll only have to look up individual specific things instead of having to read through the whole thing like it was the unabridged version of the Count of Monte Cristo. Okay? Great. So, let's get started on that random number. Alright, smooth transition. This is a chalkboard. Let's get to work. So, Dominions random number. Why does Dominions have a random number, you say? Well, as many of you probably already know, a lot of turn-based games have random number generators. Games like Civilization and Final Fantasy Tactics and all that jazz, they all have random number generators. Even a lot of times, pen and paper games, games like Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun and all that jazz, they also have random number generators in the form of dice. And that's what we're looking at here. Why do they have these things? Why does Dominion specifically have these things? Well, it's to indicate the variable performance of an individual action. So, for example, let's say you wake up one morning and you throw a baseball. And then you continue to do this all month. Every morning you wake up and you just throw a baseball. You're not getting stronger, you're not doing it enough to really build any muscle mass, but every morning you just throw the baseball. Well, some mornings you're going to throw it a little bit further than you do other mornings, right? And then maybe one morning you're going to trip over your own feet and fall face first into the grass. All these things are possible. Though the average is the most likely, sometimes there are extremes that occur. This allows for that. The variable performance and the variable effects are important to us because they seem more probable in a way. If you put a poisonous cloud over a group of people, you would think that one or two of them is just going to get lucky and survive, right? It seems weird that 100% would die every time without question. Same sort of thing where if one guy who's got a certain skill with a weapon tries to hit another guy, it seems like there would be some variability. Sometimes he might hit, sometimes he might miss. This, like I said, allows for somewhat variable outcomes. The biggest thing I would say is it turns the guaranteed into just the likely, right? So, for example, if you get hit with that poison cloud, it is likely going to kill you, but it's not guaranteed to kill you. You still have a chance to resist it, to escape, to survive. And that's one of the big things that if you read the manual it talks about. It allows for the unlikely to occur, right? The underdog, the scrappy up-and-coming fighter, is probably going to lose to the champ. But every so often, 1 out of 10 times, he's going to get that nasty uppercut and pull out a victory.
heroic stuff. And these sort of things are allowed to happen, and so by allowing this sort of unlikely thing to occur, it makes things less of a guarantee. And that's really why the Dominion's random number exists, for variable performance and to allow for the unlikely to be possible, but still unlikely. So, how is this number chosen? It's a dice roll. Yeah, it's not all that exciting, but it's a pretty good idea, really. Just 2 6-sided dice are rolled, and you put those numbers together. If you roll higher, you did better. So for example, if you roll a 3 and a 4, you get a 7. That's pretty good. If you roll a 1 and a 3, it's not as good. And you get a 4. That's worse. That's the general idea. Higher numbers are better. The higher the number, the better your performance in this individual instance. Okay, it's not quite that simple. There is a little bit of a catch. The 2 6-sided dice, they're not exactly 6-sided dice. They're what the manual calls open-ended, or what I had always referred to it as, exploding dice. What does this mean? Well, let's say you roll a 2 and a 4. You get a 6, right? Correct. Now let's say you roll a 2 and a 6. You get an 8, right? Not necessarily. You might get an 8, but that isn't the case. With exploding dice, whenever you roll a 6, you roll that die again, and you subtract 1. So if you roll a 1, you still might have a 6, but you're likely to get something else. So you might get, let's say, a 4. So now you rolled a 2, a 6, and a 4. Minus 1, and you got 11. This allows for an upper echelon, that of which is infinite. You can always get a higher roll. It's possible. So that way you never run into, once again, one of those absolute situations wherein this militia is trying to hit this big, heavily armored champion, and he'll never, ever, ever get through because numbers won't allow him. By this means, it's possible, though not likely. Why is this important? Well, because otherwise, one heavily armored champion would have a much easier and much more likely time of cleaving through literally infinite number of militia. But now, an infinite number of militia might just stand a chance if one of them can just get a lucky roll. And that's the general idea. That's Dominion's random number. It's 2d6. Expanded. Now, I will say that there's a caveat. There is a little lowercase Dominion's random number, DRN, and it's just 1d6. It's used, I think, for like dispelling global enchantments and 1 or 2 other things, but it's not very commonly used, and I'll mention it if it comes up, but it's really not a big deal. For the majority of actions, we're looking at 2d6. Alright, and that's it. Now, I was always a cool guy, but now you understand DRN, so now you're a cool guy. This has been The Last Pretender. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.